You are sitting in a room full of people, and you have never felt more alone. Everyone around you is laughing at the same joke. You understand the joke. You just don't feel it the way they do. Something in your mind is already 3 steps past the punchline, already picking apart why it worked, already wondering why nobody else seems to be doing that. This feeling has a name, and it is far older and far stranger than you might expect. Being smart was supposed to make life easier. That is the promise you were given as a child. Study hard, understand more, rise above the noise. Nobody warned you about the quiet cost sitting on the other side of that promise. Why does understanding more sometimes mean connecting less? Let's start with a strange discovery from a psychologist named Leta Hollingworth, working in the early 20th century. She spent years studying children with extraordinarily high IQs, some of them so far beyond their peers that ordinary schooling made no sense for them. What she found was not simply that these children thrived, she found something far more unsettling. Around a certain threshold of intelligence, social difficulty didn't decrease. It increased. A child with an IQ moderately above average could usually find friends easily enough. Shared interests, shared humor, shared pacing of thought, but a child whose mind ran dramatically faster or deeper than everyone else's often found something worse than being disliked. They found themselves simply unfindable. Nobody nearby was thinking on the same wavelength. Hollingworth called this the loneliness of exceptional ability, and it wasn't about arrogance or awkwardness. It was about mismatch. Their inner world had almost no one to meet it. Doesn't that reframe the whole idea of giftedness? You were taught to imagine brilliance as a spotlight, drawing people in. Hollingworth's research suggests something closer to a frequency few others can tune into. Now, here's where the story gets even more counterintuitive. You might assume this only applies to rare geniuses, the extreme outliers Hollingworth studied, but modern research suggests the pattern stretches further into ordinary life than you'd think. Evolutionary psychologists Satoshi Kanazawa and Norman Lee examined something called the Savannah theory of happiness, built on the idea that your brain still operates using instincts shaped by ancestral environments where humans lived in small, tightly bonded groups for nearly all of human history. Their research found something surprising when they looked at life satisfaction. For most people, spending more time socializing with friends correlated with greater happiness. That part isn't shocking, but for people with higher analytical intelligence, that correlation weakened, and in some cases reversed entirely. In other words, socializing frequently made less intelligent people happier, while it barely moved the needle, or even slightly decreased satisfaction, for highly intelligent people. Why would that be? Kanazawa's interpretation ties back to evolutionary mismatch. Highly intelligent minds tend to be more comfortable pursuing solitary, abstract goals that don't require constant social validation to feel meaningful. Your ancestors needed the tribe to survive. Your modern analytical mind sometimes finds more satisfaction chasing ideas than chasing company. That doesn't mean intelligent people don't want connection. It means the traditional forms of casual bonding, the surface-level chatter that keeps most social groups glued together, often feel less nourishing to a mind that craves depth. Small talk isn't just boring to that kind of mind. It can feel like static, drowning out a signal you're desperate to hear clearly. So what happens over time when this mismatch repeats itself again and again? Consider a completely different, unrelated area of research, the work of anthropologist Robin Dunbar, famous for what's now called Dunbar's number. Dunbar studied primate brain size in relation to social group size and discovered a consistent pattern. The larger an animal's neocortex, the larger the social group it can meaningfully track and maintain relationships within. For humans, Dunbar calculated that number to be roughly 150 meaningful relationships, the upper limit of social bandwidth your brain can realistically sustain. Here's the twist most people never think about. Intelligence doesn't just affect how you think, it affects how selectively you filter relationships. A highly analytical mind isn't just choosing solitude for its own sake. It's often unconsciously filtering out relationships that don't meet a certain threshold of depth, leaving fewer people who pass the filter, and a much smaller circle than Dunbar's theoretical maximum, fewer relationships. Higher standards, less tolerance for shallow connection. The math simply doesn't favor a crowded social life. You've probably felt this yourself, even in small ways. A conversation that feels like it's skimming the surface. A group setting where you nod along. but internally you've already moved 3 thoughts ahead. It isn't that you don't like people, it's that most everyday interaction isn't built for the pace or depth your mind naturally seeks. This raises an uncomfortable question. If deep thought pulls you away from casual connection, and casual connection is what keeps most social groups bonded, is isolation simply the price of a sharper mind? Not entirely, because here's the part almost no one talks about. The isolation isn't really coming from intelligence itself. It's coming from a mismatch between the depth of your mind and the shallowness of the environments most of modern life offers you. Ancient humans lived and worked and thought within tight communities where deep, meaningful exchange was baked into daily survival. Today, deep exchange has to be sought out deliberately, scheduled, almost engineered, because default modern interaction rarely reaches that level unprompted. This means the cost of intelligence was never really about being smart. It was about living inside a world that wasn't built for depth at scale. Hollingworth's gifted children weren't doomed to loneliness because of their IQ. They were isolated because almost no one nearby matched their wavelength. Kanazawa's data doesn't say intelligent people can't enjoy friendship. It says shallow friendship specifically fails to satisfy a mind wired for complexity. And Dunbar's research doesn't say analytical people are antisocial. It says their filter for meaningful connection is simply tighter. So what do you do with this? Sitting in your own version of that crowded room, laughing half a second later than everyone else? The answer isn't to dumb yourself down, and it isn't to disappear into total solitude either. It's to stop measuring connection by quantity and start measuring it by depth. You don't need 150 people who match your wavelength. Research on close relationships consistently shows that even 1 or 2 deeply understood connections can meaningfully offset the effects of broader social isolation. The goal was never to be liked by everyone in the room. It was to eventually find the one person or few people whose mind moves at a pace close enough to yours that the exhausting translation finally stops. That search takes longer for a complex mind. It requires patience most people aren't taught to have. But the reward, when it finally arrives, tends to be far more satisfying than the crowded, surface-level belonging you were chasing all along. You are sitting in a room full of people, and for the first time, that isolation doesn't feel like a flaw. It feels like a signal. Not that something is wrong with you, but that your mind is simply still searching for the frequency that was built to meet it.